Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you're as surprised and shocked by the amount of senseless violence now that are rising rapidly across Singapore. And this really is very concerning. And let's look at some of these cases and let's try to find out what's going on and what we can do about it. Let's watch on, shall we? A few weeks ago, I did a video on this topic that there seems to be a rise of senseless violence across Singapore. And I was talking about isolated cases but increasing more and more. And this was just a few weeks ago. In an unbelievable rapid rise, we see a lot more cases recently. And it's just feel like what I call insanity at the extreme. Let's analyze some of these cases, shall we? We are not even halfway into December, and there's another knife attack again. Today, there was a lady in Kovan being knifed by a man 42 years old. And that's near the Kovan Food Market, a place where I always hang out. This is quite serious. The alleged assailant, reportedly a former shop employee, argued with a female employee before pulling out a knife and waving around. Then he chased after the woman, slashed her 6 to 7 times until she appeared unconscious. And guess what? Eventually, she died. A store manager who tried to stop the attack was also injured with cut wounds. Even the knife man was also injured. This is quite concerning. Now, we're talking about death right now. This man has been charged with murder, and which means that he actually knifed the lady with the intention of committing a murder. And that's quite serious. In another case, a 67-year-old woman was found dead in an Ang Mo Kio house. The alleged male suspect is a 66-year-old man, which a victim took in out of sympathy for the person, allowed the suspect to stay with her intermittently since COVID-19 pandemic. And they often quarrel over money and alcohol. Eventually, the suspect beat the victim and stabbed her with scissors, and the woman was found dead. Youth fighting is quite common. Youth fighting to the point that there is a trail of blood and things like that. For meters, I think it's a bit extreme. A fight broke out at Block 662 Punggol Central, and there's a fighting among youths, and the blood splattered all over a public area, upsetting residents apart. Blood could be seen in front of some units from level 13 to 15 in the lift lobby, stairway, and on the walls of void deck. And that's quite serious, right? This is also a high-profile case. Actor Ryan Lian, 39 years old, was actually stabbed across his face by an assailant in front of Next, a shopping mall in Serangoon. He was stabbed 3 times in the face. So there's some disfigurement, which is quite serious. He went to a 3-hour operation and received numerous stitches to close up the wound. And he said he felt like Joker, after the operation. It's probably a very sad joke. But the attacker called Aaron Samuel Yuken was charged in court. He used a knife to slash Lian multiple times, causing him to suffer multiple laceration and abrasion. And this happened in 7th of December just recently. That's quite serious, right? Because this sounds like a senseless attack. I don't know what's the motivation. I don't even know whether they know each other. Another case of an assault in Serangoon. A man rained blows on a 71-year-old man. This person, Muhammad Yusuf, 31 years old, rained blows on a 71-year-old man. Don't know what's the reason. But for a young man to assault a 71-year-old man, I think that's crossing the line quite seriously. Apparently, the two men did not seem to know each other. And that sounds pretty senseless to my observation. Now, of course, there are previous cases where there are stabbing in Bukit Timah, where a man was accused of stabbing the priest. Up to this stage, we don't know what the motivation is. It seems pretty senseless. The priest was stabbed in the mouth, leaving him with an 8 cm laceration on his tongue, a 3 cm cut on his upper lips, and a 4 cm cut on the corner of his mouth. So clearly this was an attack that is meant to kill, And the guy it seems quite scary, This is something very concerning. This is another unusual case, targeted attack. A man directed an improvised flamethrower at police officer in Pasir Ris Park and was shot. This case was alerted 6 a.m. in the morning. A woman reported to be sitting on the ledge on top of a tower. When a police officer appeared, they did not see anyone, but instead they saw a man in a nearby hut. When they searched the case, and when they approached, the man deployed an improvised device which ejected flames towards a police officer. And of course, we know about the case where I reported last time a Yakult lady was being assaulted by a delivery man, 30 years old, and eventually died as well. So all this happened in over the last one month plus in Singapore. This is one of the most ridiculous cases I've ever heard. I thought this kind of story only happened in some gross fiction. A 38-year-old man and his victim met for music and drinks at the rooftop in Jan the 3rd in 2024. This didn't happen now. It happened like much earlier this year. The pair make out for a while. Make out. See the gap apart. It's a 30-year-old man with a 68-year-old woman. Until the victim says she was uncomfortable to continue, then they headed down to the void deck around 4 a.m. I don't know, old auntie can tahan for this kind of time. Unsatisfied, the man wanted to continue make out with the victim, but she refused. Angered by refusal, the man started arguing with her and pushed her to the ground, and she had to be sent to the hospital because her ribs actually broke. So this man was sentenced to 11 weeks in jail. I'm trying to think of the right word to use. This is quite unusual to the point of ridiculousness. I don't know. I don't know what y'all think about this. 38-year-old man, 68-year-old woman. It's just ridiculous. As another stabbing case, a victim was a grassroots leader known to a suspect in October. The brutal attack happened on 21st evening. Footage shows the assailant chasing Mr. Koo between block 311B and 311C, and he was being stabbed repeatedly until he collapsed. The attacker tried to drive away but was stopped by a police car. In Suntec City, a woman was allegedly punched by two men until three teeth were knocked loose. Concerned that her friend was drunk, a 24-year-old woman attempted to send her home. As she tried to usher the other woman in the taxi, two men allegedly punched her multiple times and knocking loose three of her teeth. And this happened in October 15. So looking at all these cases, I find it's quite concerning, right? With the exception of the young man and the old lady case, the rest of cases happened at the end of the year. I don't know what's happening in Singapore. I have a theory, which I cannot prove it, but it's just my hypothesis, is that there's a lot of bottled up frustration over whatever reason, economy, society, relationship, whatever, right? There's a lot of all this frustration, and suddenly there is a showcase of some of this knifing and violence case. And the more this kind of news come out, the more it causes the emotions to erupt in other people who have bottled up frustration. And soon, it become a norm that actually society could actually use violence to solve certain frustration and problem. This kind of thing, have a flow-on effect and has a multiplier effect. And this is quite concerning. This kind of violence is quite difficult to control because, it happens for no reason. In the case of Malaysia, for example, in JB, I would say most of the cases is because of money, right? That is somewhat easier and preventable to some extent as long as you are a bit more careful. You don't flaunt your wealth, you don't go to certain places or whatever. But in the case of this kind of violence you're facing, there's no way to stop it. And for people who try to stop it on the side, they also get attacked in the process. Like in this case of this lady who's trying to help the friend in the place of the shop manager who's trying to protect the other employee and things like that. They all get attacked and they all get injured. This is quite concerning. I don't know what can the police do in these kind of cases. I certainly think that our society is now in a very unusual condition. What help can we give? I'm not so sure, but I know more and more senseless violence are coming out. And I think it's possible that we might have even overtaken JB in violent crime. And as I said, in JB, violent crimes or crime related are mostly related to money. Not all, mostly related to money, at least those that appear on the news. Maybe there are some that don't appear on the news. I don't know. But Singapore, at the recent rate that we're going, I think we have overtaken JB in violent crimes. We used to overtake JB only in scams. That I think we are one of the world champion. But right now, we have overtaken JB in violent crimes as well. This is a point of concern. And I think we should start finger pointing at our neighbor across the straits and say that that's a dangerous place because we'll be slapping our own face if you haven't noticed. But more importantly, right now, I would say this, if this were to happen to you, I think you should run as far as possible. De-risk yourself. If you sense some of these things happening, gather a lot of people around you and go after a salient rather than you alone go after it. I think this is something that is top of concern. I think the authorities will be looking at it. If not, we should all urge as a society to stand behind against these kind of violent crimes. So let me hear your feedback on this, whether I'm overreacting. Maybe all these are no big deal to you. Maybe all these have all the while been happening, just I don't know. But I certainly think that this is a point of concern, and I do fear the safety of our residents in our country. And let's hope that all these violent crime will die off, and this is just a one-off over the last few months. Thank you for watching. Let me know your feedback, and I'll see you in a day or two. Bye-bye.